For thousands of years I lay dormant. Who has disturbed my...
Hey, best buddy!
Oh, it's you.
Death Battle is back once again after what feels like years. The scheduling change has been weird adapting to, but after a long wait, the season premiere of Season 10, Ant-Man vs. the Atom, is upon us. Honestly, I was pretty excited when this episode was announced initially. It's one of the last remaining Marvel vs. DC fights that seemed like it could actually have some fun fight stuff that didn't delve into the basic tried-and tropes that's seen in your standard Marvel vs. DC fight. So, hearing that this is what was starting off the season, I was pretty excited. But how was the episode itself? Did it start off the season with a bang? Well, let's find out. Starting off with the analysis, they're both really good. In both cases, the editing is absolutely fantastic. Some of the best of the series up to this point. It's so impressive to me how they're able to bring stale comic book panels to life like this and make them look so fluid and alive. It's also paced really well. There's hardly any Versus stuff brought up besides explaining their arsenals, and there are zero stats mentioned. They focus more on their respective origins, arsenals, and accomplishments as heroes and scientists, which I think makes it much more interesting to watch, and it all flows together really, really well. All the jokes more or less landed too. I enjoyed the running jokes of Boomstick comparing Pizza to the science of the two characters and Wiz getting more and more insecure as it goes on, as well as all the ant puns, which I found mostly charming. Hanks specifically was my favorite of the two. I love how it flows from his origins to his arsenal, and then takes the ending of the analysis to focus on how Ultron affected him and goes into detail about how his mental health declined, and how he eventually recovered and got the help he needed. It showed a side of Hank that most people, including myself, don't really know much about, since nowadays Hank's only really known as the old guy that barely does anything in the Ant-Man movies, to most casual Marvel viewers, which is myself. Adam's analysis is also solid too. It flows just as well as Ant-Man's, and I like how it ends with talking about how he's a brilliant scientist that basically came up from nothing and became a well-respected superhero. Unfortunately, there's not really a lot specifically to Adam's that makes it stand out, since all the other positives apply to Hank's as well, but I still enjoyed them both. Solid analysis all around. And now on to the fight. And honestly, it was pretty good. It had about basically everything I wanted and expected from a fight like this. The setup is a bit dumb, but in most cases that doesn't really bother me because sometimes you have to make stretches to get characters who normally wouldn't react like this to start punching each other. So it doesn't bother me that much. Gavin Hammond and Chris Okawa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, they both do a good job as Ant-Man and Adam respectively, and they both get some pretty good lines throughout the fight. Specifically Gavin as Ant-Man during the death, but don't worry, we'll get there. The fight starts out simple enough with the two of them fighting on Hank's desk and engaging in the hijinks that I expected from this fight. There were some fun interactions with the Newton's Cradle and the metal water dipping bird thing that I don't know the name of. There's some good interactions here and there, like Ray throwing Hank's Scientist Supreme line back in his face and the two of them picking apart the methods they both drink and grow. I personally enjoy the interactions throughout the fight. It feels like a more refined and less clunky execution of what they were aiming for in Lex vs. Dr. Doom, with two intelligent characters picking apart each other's tech and doing other smart things. But in this case, it doesn't hurt the pacing quite as hard. After some antics on the lab table, we get a fun reference to the Ant-Man movie, which I liked, and the fight begins to escalate more. I like the million ants fun fact, and now we get to see them use more interesting parts of their arsenal like Hank's ants and Ray's sword, I guess. I thought the shot with Ray growing and stepping on the ants was funny, and I liked how Hank tried to adjust Ray's size, but when it didn't work, he changed the car size instead. The following shot of Ray shrinking looks kind of janky and weird, but it doesn't bother me that much. Then the fight really starts to pick up, with both of them getting a chance to show off their intelligent and strategic mind, with Hank trying to hack Ray's belt and Ray getting to do some Atom science stuff to destroy Hank's gun. I don't remember. Then we get to the microverse stuff, which leads to some good hand-to-hand combat and getting a brief giant fight before Ray starts growing too much and starts affecting reality. I think that's what happens. Well, Hank explains it like immediately afterwards, so whatever. His following line feels really clunky, but it didn't really bother me too much. It bothered me more than like the shrinking scene from earlier, but it was, it was fine. But I do like the reveal that Hank was just buying time for his ants to destroy Ray's belt to give him the opening. This is followed by another good line by Hank, and then the overspace scene. This right here gave me chills. Then Hank gets one last really good line in, and then we get possibly one of the most brutal and grotesque deaths in possibly the entire series. I audibly recoiled and gasped in shock and disgust when watching this for the first time. In my opinion, this is right underneath Homelander vs. Omni-Man for being one of the most gory, over-the-top deaths in the show. But maybe that's just because I don't really like body horror that much. This was definitely not the way I expected this episode to end, but looking back at it now, I would not have had it any other way. The way the music fades out as we get an incredible shot of eternity looming over Adam, Hank's following line about not being afraid to think big, and the incredible hand-drawn stuff just rounds it all out to being a great climax to the fight. And that's Ant-Man vs. the Atom. For more broader stuff on the fight as a whole, I liked how the fight focuses on how these two are more tactically based fighters. Every single time one takes the advantage over the other, it's because of their strategic thinking. Hank uses his ants to buy him time to prepare his Pym particles, Ray grows to get the ants off of him, etc, etc. It's an interesting way for a battle to progress without one guy just powering through the other's attack and vice versa. What else? Oh yeah, the track was good. It's not something I'd listen to on its own, but it complements the fight really well. It sounds very superhero-y, and I like how the tone shifts once it gets to the overspace part of the fight. Overall, I think this was a good episode and a solid premiere for Season 10. Not the best premiere by any means, since that's a steep hill for most episodes to climb, but I did enjoy it. I'd probably give it around like an 8 out of 10. I probably would have given it a 7, but the death really carries it. I guess the main drawback, besides some occasionally stiff or awkward looking scenes, it doesn't have any other like great memorable scenes besides the death. It's overall just very consistently good in terms of quality, animation, and banter, with a great death to top it all off. As for the next time, I'm so incredibly excited. I talked about my thoughts on the Dragonborn vs. the Chosen Undead already in my Season 10 prediction video from a few months ago, so if you're interested, go check that out. But in short, I love this matchup, and I'm so excited to see what they do with it. Liam apparently also really likes this matchup to the point that he compared it to Dio vs. Alucard in the cast episode they did about it. And if he's comparing this matchup to his literal magnum opus, then I am so excited to see what he has in store for this. I always love it when they bring in new franchises to Death Battle, since it offers up its own flavor that hasn't been seen before. I also have a friend who's a Souls fan and another who's a Skyrim fan, so that'll be interesting to see unfold. Anyways, that's about all I can say. I'm so happy that Death Battle's back and started off with a pretty solid episode. I can't wait to see what's in store for the future of this show. That's all from me, and I will always be terrible at writing outros.